And I should not yawn as much this time because I've had tea and I've eaten. All right, let me share my screen. Okay. Here we go. So we were on this slide. Excuse me. This is where we left off, talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Remember, we talked about how people will fluctuate between the levels. It's not like a video game where you won't just level up once you've achieved, you know, maximum status at one level. You don't just, you can easily fall back down. All right, so we're talking about poverty. So there's two forms of poverty. So you guys are going to be reading an article, whether you choose to read it this afternoon, if you are all caught up, or if you choose to read it tomorrow morning, like when I'm going to assign it, it'll be that between the 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. time slot. There'll be an article that you guys need to read. There are two levels of poverty, basically, yeah, two levels. But two forms. Essentially, they are kind of two levels. The first form is called relative poverty. So this has to do with income inequality within a country. So for example, there are people in Canada who are poorer compared to other people. Oh, I think somebody's wanting to be let into the meeting. Sorry guys, I have to do this before I can continue on. Okay. Yeah, so we have relative poverty, like I said, has to do with income inequality within a country. Not quite. So apart from relative poverty, we then have absolute poverty. So absolute poverty has to do with a lack of basic resources. For example, there are people globally who do not have access to the minimum needed to survive. I don't know why that got cut out. Absolute poverty is like poverty in that picture on the slide there, guys. Relative poverty, relative poverty is not necessarily a bad thing. People can be deemed, relatively impoverished or fall under relative poverty just because you make less money than the average family in Canada. You could still get Netflix with your relative poverty. Absolute poverty is bad. Absolute poverty is when you don't have access to, those basic survival needs. No, we're not. You being a good boy? Barking. Vincent, we're in a pandemic. We're pretty much in a shut-in. All right, I'll give you a minute to write this down if you're writing it by hand. Lay down. Lay down, Madison. In your bed. In your bed. Yeah, lay down. Good boy. Okay, are we good with this slide? You have this one down. If you're writing it by hand, give me a thumbs up if we're good to move on. Okay. All right, so the Bible and poverty, because this is religion. So money is referred to the most beyond God in scriptures. So ever since, thousands of years ago, currency has been, extremely important and very, I guess, high up in the list of things that kind of run our lives. So anyone who follows Jesus must be rich towards God. That can also be seen as a metaphor. So money is a good human invention, but obviously, like anything, it can be abused. So to become rich in material things is not a particularly Christian goal in life. So we've talked about this before in class, how God does not want us to place value on material possessions, and that includes money, because our value doesn't come from what we have, or what we're capable of doing. It comes from just being human. So last, the church demands that the economy, serve humanity. If money was never invented, there would have been something invented or something that would take the place of money, right? There always has to be some sort of give and take, some sort of currency. The PS5 is pretty cool, guys. So this should be kind of a reiteration of what you already know, right? We talk about in class how Christians or Catholics, we don't place value on material possessions. Like I said, money's included in that. So obviously this slide should just kind of reiterate that for you. It should make sense. Unfortunately, money is something that really runs most of our lives. There's not too many people that can just live without it, live off the land, move away. Kind of, you could think about like Alaskan bush people, but even then they still, like that show, even then they still need money. There's still use of money. but to try and place as little value, I should say, I guess, on not necessarily importance, because money is important, but place less value on the amount of money that you have, and you'll live, a happier life. They didn't have $100 bills back then. It's like coins. Silver. Okay, are we good with this slide? Give me a thumbs up if you're writing it by hand, and we're going to move on. Plus, Landon, would you rather, if Jesus was around, be, healed or cured of something, witness miracles, or have $100? Am I right or am I right? All right, are we good to move on? Sorry. Xavier. All right, moving on. Okay, common good. So you already know the only basically depth of common good that we touched on in class was the fact that we know the definition of it, right? So you knew that from your last unit test that common good meant that the ability for everyone to reach their full potential. So we're just going to jump in a little bit more detail-wise on what common good is. So a quote from Gandhi here. Hopefully you know who Gandhi is. I think we talked about him a little bit when we went over the Beatitudes. But the health of a society is based on how it treats its weakest members. So think about that for a second and let that sink in. So basically, and health of a society, don't think like health as in like your physical health. Like think of how a society thrives or how well it does. How well people work together. The health of a society is based on how it treats its weakest members. So let that sink in for a second. And think about our society. So how does our society treat its weakest members? Do you think our society treats them well? Do you think we outcast them? Do you think we oppress them? Do you think we strive to help them? How do you think society treats our weakest members? You can write an answer in the chat, or if you want to turn your mic on to speak about it, you can put your hand up. Claire, you think they outcast them? Yeah. What else do you guys think? How do you think our society treats our weakest members? It's a tough question. So think about, a lot of times, like there's sometimes that we have food banks. We have a lot of nice people that, donate to food banks, and we have clothing drives, and we have things that we do, say like even in our school community. How However, when it comes down to it, society as a whole, do you think we treat them that well? Yeah, Molly, I agree with you. We definitely do better than I think some countries, but we do have a long way to go. Xavier, you're not wrong when you say like a lot of the time people just society just tries to kind of ignore or avoid the weakest members rather than helping them. Claire, yeah, we're right. We do, tend to look down on them rather than seeing them as equals. And all of that contributes to our society not, being overly healthy, right? So if not everybody in our society is surviving and thriving, then how can our society as a whole be considered healthy? So the central obligation of every individual is to take care of the needs of those on the margins of society. So meaning basically the ones who are kind of falling through the cracks. So if you are able to help someone who is, on the margins of society, someone who, is deemed the weakest members, it is our obligation or our duty to help when we can. So common good is the social condition that allows all people, so we knew this definition, right? All people in society to reach their full human potential. That being said, we need to stress and bold the word all. Because just because somebody in our society, maybe we have people who are homeless or people who are, drug abusers, people who are jobless, people who are, are on welfare or government income. They are still members of society as a whole, and we can't be striving for common good if not everybody is able to reach their full potential. Xavier, I don't know what that means. So the last point here is it calls us to, the common good is what I'm talking about here. It calls us to look beyond our own needs and become interested in the good of all, especially those who have no voice and no power. So like I was saying earlier, we have to, be a voice for the voiceless. We have to uphold and respect the rights and human dignity of people, even if we deem them society's weakest members. That doesn't matter. Everyone is still entitled to dignity and their rights, like that can never be stripped from them. Hopefully you watched the video from yesterday's note, the one that we didn't have time to watch because it is like 10 minutes or so long, but the one with the paid actors I told you about, with the teens who are pretending to basically attack the human dignity of a homeless man in order to give him $5 or something. And just to see, it was a social experiment to see how the public would react. So even somebody who would be deemed like a weak member of society, like a homeless man, you can still see that the public will not allow, I should say, or put up with people deliberately attacking another human being's human dignity. Right, so the public came up and they made those teenagers feel very small and feel really, really awful for what they were doing. Saying that like, you don't know his story, you don't understand. Like, if you want to give him the money, give him the money. If you don't, keep walking, kind of thing. So our minds and our natural instincts, they're in the right place, but we just don't necessarily do everything that we can to help. Does that make sense? I hope so. So I'll give you a minute to jot this down if you're writing it by hand. I'm gonna eat my toast. All right, do you think we are good to move on to the next slide? Someone want to give me a thumbs up if you're writing it by hand, and we're good to move on. Okay. All right. So option for the poor. So option for the poor is the choice to put the needs of our weakest members first among our social concerns, right? So when it comes to what your concerns are about society and about our, social constructs, putting those weakest members first is what this means. So why does God call humanity to place the needs of the poor first? Simply put, their survival needs are urgent. So when somebody's, survival needs are at stake, when they are being deprived of those basic survival needs, we need to, God wants us to put those people first. So choosing to defend the poor does not imply that they're better or more valuable than others in society. They're just more, vulnerable. They're more in need. I think that's the last one. So like we talked about with the preferential option for the poor in the 7 Catholic social teachings, God has like a special connection with the poor. And that is because they are, they're more in need than others, right? God not necessarily focuses his attention where it's needed most. But obviously, if say Landon and Xavier, if all they need in life right now is a PS5, but there are people who are, struggling to find food or struggling to get water or they don't have shelter, their needs are going to come before, obviously, Landon and Xavier's need for a material item. So God has that special connection with the ones who need him most. Vincent, is there a new Xbox? I don't know that there is. PS5 is pretty cool, but it's massive, guys. It looks like it's like triple the size of the PS4. Just so you guys are aware, it's huge. Looks like a little spaceship. So, does anybody have any questions at this point about Maslow's hierarchy? Bleh, I'm struggling with that word. Hierarchy of needs, the option for the poor, common good, poverty, anything like that? I'm going to take that as a no. We're all good. We're all in full understanding. We're solid on this topic, I hope. So like I said, the topic of poverty is a good area to focus maybe your question around for our guest speaker tomorrow morning. Because like I said, don't forget that you need to come up with one question each at least. If you come up with multiple, for sure, go ahead. I'd like you to be able to ask something that has to do with our course, our unit right now. But if you have any personal questions that you're just interested in and you want to ask a police officer, then definitely go ahead and ask. Like, think about being appropriate. Obviously, I have no doubt that you guys wouldn't be. But think about, being appropriate. Think about being respectful. But he has experienced and seen a lot of crazy stuff, so he has a lot of good insight. So if you guys, or maybe policing is a career that you're interested in, then you can definitely ask him any questions that you are interested in. He's an open book, and he is looking forward to talking to you guys. He's really excited about it. All right, does everybody have this slide down? Are we good to move on from this note? Because this is the last slide. Excuse me, give me a thumbs up if you are good to move on. Or a yes, or whatever you need to write in there to let me know you're good. Let's see, Kate and Decimus, Aaliyah, are you guys all good? Julia's good. Decimus is good. Xavier is, Aaliyah, perfect. Okay, awesome. Moving on. So what we are doing next is reading. Actually, no, we're not going to read this first. We are going to watch, make sure my computer volume is turned up. Stop. Nacho. Okay. Oh, my phone's happened. Something's happened to my computer. We are going to watch this video first. So it's a TED Talk. It's a little, just over 10 minutes long. It's pretty interesting. It's based on all these different experiments that they did. It's an older one, like it's from 2013, but it's a really cool concept. So it talks about how to buy happiness, basically how money can buy happiness. So we're going to watch this, and then we are going to chat about it a little bit as best as we can virtually. And then we are going to read an article called Life on the Edge. All right, here we go.
So I want to talk today about money and happiness, which are two things that a lot of us spend a lot of our time thinking about, either trying to earn them or trying to increase them. And a lot of us resonate with this phrase. So we see it in religions and self-help books that money can't buy happiness. And I want to suggest today that, in fact, that's wrong. And that I'm at a business school, so that's what we do. So that's wrong. And in fact, if you think that, you're actually just not spending it right. So that instead of spending it the way you usually spend it, maybe if you spent it differently, that might work a little bit better. And before I tell you the ways that you can spend it that will make you happier, let's think about the ways we usually spend it that don't, in fact, make us happier. We had a little natural experiment. So CNN a little while ago wrote this interesting article on what happens to people when they win the lottery. Turns out people think when they win the lottery, their lives are going to be amazing. This article is about how their lives get ruined. So what happens when people win the lottery is, number one, they spend all the money and go into debt. And number two, all of their friends and everyone they've ever met find them and bug them for money. And it ruins their social relationships, in fact. So they have more debt and worse friendships than they had before they won the lottery. What was interesting about the article was people started commenting on the article, readers of the thing. And instead of talking about how it had made them realize that money doesn't lead to happiness, everyone instantly started saying, you know what I would do if I won the lottery? And fantasizing about what they do. And here's just two of the ones that we saw that are just really interesting to think about. One person wrote in, when I win, I'm going to buy my own little mountain and have a little house on top. And another person wrote, I would fill a big bathtub with money and get in the tub while smoking a big fat cigar and sipping a glass of champagne. This is even worse now. Then I'd have a picture taken and dozens of glossies made. Anyone begging for money or trying to extort from me would receive a copy of the picture and nothing else. And so many of the comments were exactly of this type, where people got money, and in fact, it made them antisocial. So I told you that it ruins people's lives and that their friends bug them. It also, money often makes us feel very selfish and we do things only for ourselves. And we said, well, maybe the reason that money doesn't make us happy is that we're always spending it on the wrong things. And in particular, that we're always spending it on ourselves. And we thought, I wonder what would happen if we made people spend more of their money on other people. So instead of being antisocial with your money, what if you were a little bit more pro-social with your money? And we thought, let's make people do it and see what happens. So let's have some people do what they usually do and spend money on themselves. And let's make some people give money away and measure their happiness and see if in fact they get happier. So the first way that we did this, on one Vancouver morning, we went out on the campus at University of British Columbia, and we approached people and said, do you want to be in an experiment? And they said yes. We asked them how happy they were. And then we gave them an envelope. And one of the envelopes had things in it that said, by 5 p.m. today, spend this money on yourself. So we gave some examples of what you could spend it on. Other people in the morning got a slip of paper that said, by 5 p.m. today, spend this money on somebody else. Also inside the envelope was money, and we manipulated how much money we gave them. So some people got this slip of paper and $5. Some people got this slip of paper and $20. We let them go about their day. They did whatever they wanted to do. We found out that they did, in fact, spend it in the way that we asked them to. We called them up at night and asked them, what'd you spend it on, and how happy do you feel now? What did they spend it on? Well, these are college undergrads, so a lot of what they spent it on for themselves was things like earrings and makeup. One woman said she bought a stuffed animal for her niece. People gave money to homeless people. Huge effect here of Starbucks. So if you give undergraduates $5, it looks like coffee to them, and they run over to Starbucks and spend it as fast as they can. But some people bought a coffee for themselves the way they usually would, but other people said that they bought a coffee for somebody else. So the very same purchase, just targeted toward yourself or targeted toward somebody else. What did we find when we called them back at the end of the day? People who spent money on other people got happier. People who spent money on themselves, nothing happened. It didn't make them less happy. It just didn't do much for them. And the other thing we saw is that the amount of money doesn't matter that much. So people thought that $20 would be way better than $5. In fact, it doesn't matter how much money you spent. What really matters is that you spent it on somebody else rather than on yourself. We see this again and again when we give people money to spend on other people instead of on themselves. Of course, these are undergraduates in Canada, not the world's most representative population. They're also fairly wealthy and affluent and all these other sorts of things. We wanted to see if this holds true everywhere in the world or just among wealthy countries. So we went, in fact, to Uganda and ran a very similar experiment. So imagine instead of just People Canada, we say, name the last time you spent money on yourself or other people, describe it, how happy did it make you? Or in Uganda, name the last time you spent money on yourself or other people and describe that. And then we ask them how happy they are. Again, and what we see is sort of amazing because there's human universals on what you do with your money and then real cultural differences on what you do as well. So for example, one guy from Uganda says this. He says, I called a girl I wish to love. We basically went out on a date, and he says at the end that he didn't achieve her up till now. Here's a guy from Canada, very similar thing. I took my girlfriend out for dinner. We went to a movie. We left early, and then went back to her room for only cake. Just cake only. Human universal. So you spend money on other people, you're being nice to them. Maybe you have something in mind, maybe not. But then we see extraordinary differences. So look at these two. This is a woman from Canada. We say, name a time you spent money on somebody else. She says, I bought a present for my mom. I drove to the mall in my car, bought a present, gave it to my mom. Perfectly nice thing to do. It's good to get gifts for people that you know. Compare that to this woman from Uganda. I was walking and met a longtime friend whose son was sick with malaria. They had no money. They went to a clinic. And I gave her this money. This isn't $10,000, it's the local currency. So it's a very small amount of money, in fact. But enormously different motivations here. This is a real medical need, literally a life-saving donation. Above, it's just kind of, bought a gift for my mother. What we see again, though, is that the specific way that you spend on other people isn't nearly as important as the fact that you spend on other people in order to make yourself happy, which is really quite important. So you don't have to do amazing things with your money to make yourself happy. You can do small, trivial things and yet still get these benefits from doing this. These are only 2 countries. We also wanted to go even broader and look at every country in the world, if we could, to see what the relationship is between money and happiness. We got data from the Gallup organization, which you know from all the political polls that have been happening lately. They asked people, did you donate money to charity recently? And they asked them, how happy are you with your life in general? And we can see what the relationship is between those 2 things. Are they positively correlated? Giving money makes you happy, or are they negatively correlated? On this map, green will mean they're positively correlated, and red means they're negatively correlated. And you can see the world is crazily green. So in almost every country in the world where we have this data, people who give money to charity are happier people than people who don't give money to charity. I know you're all looking at that red country in the middle. I would be a jerk and not tell you what it is, but in fact, it's Central African Republic. You can make up stories. Maybe it's different there for some reason or another. Just below that to the right is Rwanda, though, which is amazingly green. So almost everywhere we look, we see that giving money away makes you happier than keeping it for yourself. What about your work life, which is where we spend all the rest of our time when we're not with the people we know? We decided to infiltrate some companies and do a very similar thing. So these are sales teams in Belgium. They work in teams. They go out and sell basically to doctors and try to get them to buy drugs. So we can look to see how well they sell things as a function of being a member of a team. Some teams, we give people on the team some money for themselves and say, spend it however you want on yourself, just like we did with the undergrads in Canada. But other teams, we say, here's 15 euro. Spend it on one of your teammates this week. Buy them something as a gift or a present and give it to them. And then we can see, now we've got teams that spend on themselves, and we've got these pro-social teams who we give money to make the team a little bit better. The reason I have a ridiculous piñata there is one of the teams pulled their money and bought a piñata, and they all got around and smashed the piñata, and all the candy fell out and things like that. A very silly, trivial thing to do, but think of the difference on a team that didn't do that at all, that got 15 euro, put it in their pocket, maybe bought themselves a coffee, or teams that had this pro-social experience where they all bonded together to buy something and do a group activity. What we see is that, in fact, the teams that are pro-social sell more stuff than the teams that only got money for themselves. And one way to think about it is, for every 15 euro you give people for themselves, they put it in their pocket, they don't do anything different than they did before, you don't get any money from that. You actually lose money because it doesn't motivate them to perform any better. But when you give them 15 euro to spend on their teammates, they do so much better on their teams that you actually get a huge win on investing this kind of money. And I realize that you're probably thinking to yourselves, this is all fine, but there's a context that's incredibly important for public policy, and I can't imagine it would work there. And if he doesn't show me that it works here, I don't believe anything he said. And I know that what you're all thinking about are dodgeball teams. This was a huge criticism that we got, to say, if you can't show with dodgeball teams, this is all stupid. So we went out and found these dodgeball teams and infiltrated them, and we did the exact same thing as before. So some teams we give people on the team money, they spend it on themselves. Other teams we give them money to spend on their dodgeball teammates. The teams that spent money on themselves, they're just the same winning percentage as they were before. The teams that we give them money to spend on each other, they become different teams, and in fact, they dominate the league by the time they're done. Across all of these different contexts, your personal life, your work life, even silly things like intramural sports, we see spending on other people has a bigger return for you than spending on yourself. And so I'll just say, I think if you think money can't buy happiness, you're not spending it right. The implication is not, you should buy this product instead of that product, and that's the way to make yourself happier. It's in fact that you should stop thinking about which product to buy for yourself and try giving some of it to other people instead. And we luckily have an opportunity for you. DonorsChoose.org is a nonprofit for mainly public school teachers in low-income schools. They post projects, so they say, I want to teach Huckleberry Finn to my class, and we don't have the books. Or I want a microscope to teach my students science, and we don't have a microscope. You and I can go on and buy it for them. The teacher writes you a thank you note. The kids write you a thank you note. Sometimes they send you pictures of them using the microscope. It's an extraordinary thing. Go to the website and start yourself on the process of thinking, again, less about how can I spend money on myself and more about, if I've got $5 or $15, what can I do to benefit other people? Because ultimately, when you do that, you'll find out you'll benefit yourself much more. Thank you.
Okay. So, show of hands here, or if you can virtually show of hands. Like, how many of you guys we just went through holiday. So how many of you guys much prefer to buy gifts for other people opposed to receive gifts? I'm definitely one of those people. Like, I could never receive a gift from somebody again for the rest of my life, and I get great happiness from buying people gifts and, you know, seeing the happiness it brings them. So think about it. I think I want you guys to think about how good you feel when you do things like that. Like, I know I've used the example when I go to Toronto, and I would buy a meal, you know, a warm meal for someone who's homeless. To see how thankful they are, that you've made a difference, even if it's minor, but you've made a difference in somebody's life, or maybe somebody's day, somebody's evening, maybe just even that hour. That is extremely rewarding and brings us great happiness. So I know there's a lot of videos on the internet. I'm sure we could find some and I could post them for you if you want, but of people, you know, going around and they do these social experiments. I know there was one that was circulating. I don't know if it was, I don't know, probably not. I don't have TikTok, so I'm guessing it's not TikTok, but circulating Instagram anyways, of this young guy. He's pretty, I don't remember his name, but he's a wealthy guy. And what he would do is he saw, like, one example was he saw this kid playing basketball by himself. So then he went up and was playing basketball with him. He kind of got to know him a little bit, wanted to, you know, learn about why he was there by himself, like realized like this kid was kind of going through a hard time. And then as he said he had to go, he was leaving, he pretended to drop, I think it was like $500 or something from his bag, and then walk away and to see if the kid would, you know, or the person, whoever was part of the social experiment, would return the money. And every time they did, then every time the guy who was running the social experiment would say, like, this is a test, like, this is for you, like, it's money for you to have now. And to see how appreciative and how happy these people are, like, that is what brings us genuine happiness. So try to think about that TED Talk. If you need to watch it again at some point, definitely do so. And think about how much happier we feel when we do something good for other people, right? So if you spend your money on something for somebody else, you feel, you feel better generally. Like, you feel happier as a person. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe you guys, you don't drive, so you probably haven't, but like maybe your parents have experienced or done this. It's kind of like a return the favor type thing. But has anybody ever, paid for your drive-through order? Like, maybe the car in front of you said, oh, I'm going to, what did the person behind me get? I'd like to pay for it. And then you do that. And then when that person goes up to the window, you know that they're just going to be surprised and, just feel genuinely like appreciative that a stranger would do that for you. And I try to do that. I don't drink coffee, so I don't go through, and I don't eat fast food, but I don't go through drive-throughs all that often. But because of that, when I do go through a drive-through, I almost always try to buy the person behind me their order. And you might do that 10 times and it might never happen to you. But I find that it is most rewarding to know that you maybe made somebody's day, because you don't know what people are going through. So we are talking about, on that concept, kind of life on the edge. Okay, so we are going to read this article. Oops, I'm going to have the highlight function. So you should have been able to download this from our course D2L page. And then you can either print it, follow along, or you can just follow along the way I am. Make sure you annotate, highlight, whatever you need to do to, you can see there's a lot of bolding. So there's stuff in here that is going to be important. So we're going to read this, and then that will likely bring us to the end of our meeting today. And then I'll have a very brief, like 5 minutes to tell you, what I want you guys to focus on for the afternoon again, and then we'll call it a day. So this is called Life on the Edge. So food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education are all basic requirements for a good life. Things that most of us take for granted. For the first time in the history of the world, humanity has enough resources to provide these to all people. Yet, billions of people around the world and millions of people in the United States are prevented from living a good life. And this can be seen as well as in Canada. This just happens to be an article but from the States, but the concept's the same. So a life of dignity that allows them to thrive as God intended, because they lack one or more of these basic necessities. So it may be possible for them, maybe impossible for them to even keep themselves and their loved ones alive. So think about the article we read before in the first meeting about Laura and how she is, has a hard time, possibly keeping her sick son alive because she's been deprived of those basic necessities. So the experience of not having the basic things one needs to live a full and dignified life is called poverty. So poverty denies people their basic human rights. So Catholic social teaching does not require absolute equality in the distribution of income and wealth. So the U.S. Catholic bishops note in their 1986 pastoral letter called Economic Justice for All. But extreme inequality that causes people to suffer as a result of poverty runs contrary to God's will for his creation. Catholic social teaching is concerned with poverty because poverty can prevent people from fully living out their God-given human dignity. The way poverty harms people differs from person to person, right? Because we had those two different forms of poverty, right? Relative poverty and absolute poverty. So they're both poverty. However, it differs from person to person. So we can note some common characteristics of poverty that most poor people experience. So the first being the nearness of death. So poor people are always at greater risk of death than people who are not poor, unfortunately. Although the life expectancy of the world's wealthiest people is more than 75 years, the average lifespan of the world's poorest people is only 40. So for the poorest people in the U.S. and the world, survival is an everyday concern. So there's chronic hunger, health problems, and violence that are some of the most common ways people living in poverty experience the nearness of death. So especially in the United States, where healthcare is not free, but at the same time, it's really difficult if you don't have a health card to get healthcare in Canada, right? We have OHIP, so you need to have a health card, like a working health card, in order to get healthcare. Sorry, guys, I'm just gonna let Chris back in. Another thing is marginalization. So poverty is both caused by and results in exclusion, which is another word for marginalization, from the community. So in that Economic Justice for All, the Catholic bishops describe marginalization of the poor this way. So this is a quote from them. So poverty is not merely the lack of adequate financial resources. It entails a more profound kind of deprivation. So a denial of full participation in the economic, social, and political life of society, and an inability to influence decisions that affect one's life. So just as this article is called, Living on the Edge. So as a result of marginalization, people who live in poverty live life on the edge for, quote unquote. Because they have so little, it does not take much to make life worse for them. For most families, an illness or or a car breaking down is, an inconvenience. For poor families without medical insurance or money for car repairs, these things can mean the loss of a home or a job. So like if your car breaks down and you have no money to fix it, and you then also have no money for a taxi, you have no money for bus fare maybe, how are you going to get to work? Right? So if you are poor and you can't afford this, tow trucks cost money. Tow trucks are extremely expensive. You can't. So that might in turn lead to the loss of a job. And then with the loss of a job, then that means the loss of income. And therefore that could lead to the loss of your home. So you see what I mean by that domino effect. And then there's the cycle of poverty. So poor people often become trapped in this cycle of poverty. So in which the lack of basic resources creates barriers that prevent people from obtaining those resources. So without a car, for instance, job opportunities are limited, like I just said. Without a job, it's then difficult to get a car. So you get in this cycle of poverty. Interrelated problems cause and reinforce one another. So homelessness and hunger lead to an inadequate education for homeless children. For instance, inadequate education leads then to reduced job opportunities. And so the cycle just continues. Hopefully you can see like that. Like I said, it's all connected. It's all a domino effect. And then you have barriers to full development. So finally, poverty prevents people from developing to their full potential, which is the common good, right? So all the unique talents and self-confidence and social skills that allow people to thrive. So poverty prevents full development in two ways. So first, you have the experience of poverty can lead people, especially children, to develop a worldview in which a better lifestyle seems impossible. People learn how to live a good life through the example of others. And when people live on the margins of society, where everyone they know is poor, it's difficult to see a way out. And then second, people who live in poverty are denied the resources necessary for their full development. So we went over Maslow's hierarchy of need. So he proposed a theory, which we already know about. So it's about human motivation based on the hierarchy of human needs, right? So we already talked about this. So we don't really need to get into too much detail about that. Okay, guys, chill with the gifts. So if basic needs go unmet, higher needs become more difficult to fill, right? So we said it's like a domino. It's not like a level up type thing. So it's hard for a child who has not eaten for a day to develop her curiosity, and it is difficult for someone who's unable to find a job to maintain self-esteem. So people need personal resources like self-esteem and a sense of safety if they are to have the best chance at escaping this cycle of poverty. So we're diving into the option for the poor again, a little bit more detail. So because poverty can prevent people from fully living out their God-given human dignity, Catholic social teaching calls society, where are we? There we go. That is just would have been the hierarchy of needs, but we already know this. So the Catholic social teaching calls society to make the needs of its poorest and most vulnerable members a top concern. So like we talked about in our note, right? It is the fact that they have a special connection and relationship with God, and it is our job as a society to place their needs of our poorest members at the top of the, concern. So the choice to do this is called the option for the poor, and vulnerable. So Ryan, Andrew, and Caitlin, whoever these people are, they made an option for the poor. They, you could organize something called Matthew's closet notice. Oh, sorry, closet. So notice through, the purpose of that, it would be Matthew's closet would be something like where you would donate clothes and people could come in and get them for either a reasonable price or for free. So it goes beyond giving away clothes. So students then, in this case, this example for what they did, they were trying to create a place where poor people would be treated with respect, and that recognizes the image of God in each of them. So then obviously customers there are going to recognize themselves as real persons. They're not going to feel like they are lesser than anybody else just because they're shopping at something or they're at a store where maybe things are free. So this concept of Matthew's closet that these students came up with, it reflects the true spirit of the option of the poor. So it's about more than just giving people the basic resources necessary for living, but it's also about providing them with whatever they need to live out their dignity as images of God. So think about your dignity would take a hit if you say could not provide for your family for something, maybe something happened, you lost your job. At one point you were providing for them and then something happened where you lost your job and you were no longer able to provide, and you in turn had to then go to a food bank or you had to go to a place like Matthew's Closet to shop. that would take a toll on your dignity, right? As a person, you would feel like a lesser person, right? Like you failed as a person. And that's not fair. And if you feel that way, it's also hard to work that back up. And it definitely would be demeaning. So this concept of Matthew's Closet was to make them feel respected, make them feel like they were just anybody else shopping, right? It doesn't matter that they were in poverty or they were poor. It was supposed to just make them feel like humans, basically like people. And that does so much for, our human dignity. So the church calls for society to make an option for the poor. This flows from the conviction that people deserve fair access to the earth's materials, resources, as well as the resources of the human community, so that they can fully develop their own unique ways of loving God and loving others. So how do we develop a society in which everyone has what they need to live a full and dignified life? We need to raise our awareness of the reality of poverty by asking these questions. How does poverty affect people? And why are so many people poor? So there are questions here, which I just want you guys to ponder. I'm not going to get you guys to answer them because we've kind of already talked about, like you described the cycle of poverty. You've talked about, we already know these things. You've highlighted them in this article, so you should be able to know them. Like if I, when you see them on your test review, if I ask you what marginalization means, you should be able to pull it from this article. And then you should hopefully by this point fully understand what the option of the for the poor means, right? And what our duty as a society is for these people. Do you guys have any questions about this? About what it means to live life on the edge? So I know we often say like, oh, live life on the edge, like, and that is like a common phrase for people who, live life kind of dangerously. And I think when it comes to poverty and being poor, obviously the concept of living life on the edge and living dangerously is still there, but it's not a positive thing, right? It's not saying to, take risks and to, strive for, higher or adrenaline and take on challenges that you might not succeed in. In this case, life on the edge is quite literally you're teetering on the edge of surviving or dying. And that's kind of what we're looking at and what we're talking about when we say that poor people live life on the edge. So I hope that you understand that concept. And if I asked you, like I said on your test review, what it means to live life on the edge when you are living in poverty, that you'll be able to explain to me what that means. Do you guys have any questions about this article, about the TED Talk, or about the remainder of that note that we took? If not, I am just going to pull up our course page here for a second so you'll see what I updated. So we watched the video, we read the article, and so what I need you guys to do now is, if you haven't started already, you're going to read the Be With Me pages, like the articles, page 134 to 137, and then you have your handout. So I know before the handout wouldn't download, so I changed it now. So now it's a Word document, so you can complete it right on Word and then save it and then hand it into the Dropbox. So there's already a Dropbox there for you. Okay, yeah, guys, please chill with the gifts I said. Remember I said use it for questions because it's very distracting. So if you click this, it should automatically, I'm going to say allow and download. So if you click on here, you will see, once it loads, here just click enable editing and it tells you this is basically what you're doing, right? So you've got your page numbers, you got your titles for the sections of the reading, and then it should go in order, but here are your questions. So you can just answer your questions right on here. I would turn it off. You can answer your questions right on Word and then save your document and then upload it to the Dropbox. So the Dropbox is here. They'll click on the Dropbox. And then you will see these two. So then click on preferential option for the poor handout and then upload it. One last thing I wanted to show you guys is, because I see some of you are already done this. You'll see on the thing here, it is due tomorrow by 11:59 p.m. Ella, let me check for you if we got it. I'll tell you who I have. I have Ella's right here. Got it. Not everything is going to be due the next day. It just depends on how difficult of a task it is, right? So tomorrow you're going to be getting your summative assignment, which is not very long by any means, but it will take you a little bit more time because there's reading and stuff involved and some research. So I'm going to give you guys that tomorrow, and that won't be due, you know, until I'll probably have it due like on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. kind of thing. So I'll give you lots of time, but you'll see the due dates will be here. But because some of you guys are already done that, if you want to get a head start, like I said, tomorrow morning, you will be having Officer Campbell talk to you guys in our morning meeting. It's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about it, and hopefully you guys are as well. But like I said, your task is to come up with one question to ask him. And then once you're done that, if you're done everything, tomorrow morning, like I said, between the time of 9 and 10 a.m. before our daily meeting, first daily meeting, I'm going to have you guys read this article. So it's called Justice for All. If you click on it, it should load. Make sure you zoom in because the print is a bit small. So you are to read, it's just the 2 pages here. It talks about corporal works versus spiritual works, and it just talks about more about poverty, when poverty is not always bad and when prosperity is not always good. Okay, so you're going to read this, and then we'll chat about it at the end, either at the end of our daily meeting, depending on how long Officer Campbell talks, or for our second meeting tomorrow. So if you're done, like I said, if you're done your reading and you're done your handout on the preferential option for the poor, then you can move on to reading that. Other than that, let me unshare my screen here. You guys should be good. So do you guys have any questions about anything we covered today? I know it was quite a bit. If you do, Haley, yeah.
Can I have my mic on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I can't show up for the next call. Is that okay?
Like tomorrow morning?
No, like today.
We don't have another one today.
Oh.
Yeah, so you're good.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so if everybody is good, then we're good to go. Don't forget, come up with your question for Officer Campbell. I'm super excited for him to talk to you guys. It should be really cool and interesting. And it'll give you guys a bit of a break from just hearing me talk all day. But if you figure out that you have any more questions for the remainder of the day, just shoot me an email. If you want to have a one-on-one Teams meeting about something, I'm okay with that as well. But if you're all good, then I will, see you tomorrow morning. And then I'm very excited to introduce you to Officer Campbell. All right. Goodbye, my friends. Get to work and enjoy the rest of your day.